Hello, mathematicians. Today we're going to be learning how to graph in standard form. So as we know, standard form is another form we use to represent linear equations. Standard form is represented by the equation ax plus by is equal to c, where a and b are coefficients, c is a constant and a constraint. So as we know, when we write in standard form, a, b, and c are all integers, and a cannot be negative. So our equation here is 3x plus 2y is equal to 6. So when we have slope-intercept form, we have our slope and our y-intercept. And when we have point-slope form, we have a coordinate and a slope. So unlike those two forms, here in standard form, we can't actually tell what our slope is, what our y-intercept is, or what any of the coordinate is. However, because it's written as we see here, it does make it a lot easier to find our y-intercept and our x-intercept. So in order to find our y-intercept, we know that it's when x is equal to 0. So if we were looking to find our y-intercept, we would rewrite this as 3 times 0 because we would substitute x for 0 to find our y-intercept plus 2y is equal to 6. Now what happens when you substitute x for 0 to find the y-intercept is that this term actually cancels out because 3 times 0 is simply 0. And now you're left with 2y is equal to 6. And in order to get y by itself, all we have to do is divide both sides by our coefficient here, which is 2. And we're left with y is equal to 3. So that means when x is equal to 0, y is equal to 3, so our y-intercept is 3. So we could simply plot that here. And now, if I wanted to find my x-intercept, we would do the same thing, but instead of substituting x for 0, we'd have to substitute y for 0. So we leave the 3x alone because now we want the x-intercept, and we write out plus 2 times 0. We substitute the y for 0 is equal to 6. And now the same thing happens. When you do substitute y for 0, this term 2 times 0 is just 0. So that's just 0. So we're left with 3x is equal to 6. And now when we have 3x is equal to 6, we could easily divide both sides by 3 to get the value of x. X is equal to 2. So that means when y is equal to 0, x is equal to 2. So if I plot my y-intercept and my x-intercept, that's more than enough for me to draw my line because that's 2 coordinates. And so all you would have to do is then draw a line through your coordinates and draw an arrow at each end, and that's it. So standard form is very useful because it's very easy to find our x and our y-intercept, and we could just plot those two. So remember, this is our y-intercept, 0, 3. Our y-intercept is when x is equal to 0, and our x-intercept is when our x-intercept is when y is equal to 0. So we have 2, 0. So our y-intercept is when x is equal to 0, and our x-intercept is when y is equal to 0. All right, so here we have another example. We have 5x plus 2y is equal to negative 10. And if I wanted to find my y-intercept, remember all you would have to do is substitute our x with 0. So 5 times 0 plus 2y is equal to negative 10. And since this is 5 times 0, this cancels out. I'm left with 2y is equal to negative 10. And in order to get y by itself, I do have to divide both sides by 2. So y is equal to negative 5. So our y-intercept in this case is down here. So that's 0, 5, and so sorry, 0, negative 5, and that's our y-intercept. And now if I wanted to find my x-intercept, all I would have to do is plug in 0 for 2. So, sorry, plug in 0 for y. So 5x plus 2, substitute that with 0, is equal to negative 10. So this cancels out because it's simply 0. So I have 5x is equal to negative 10. So in order to get the x by itself, I have to divide both sides by 5. And x is equal to negative 2. And our x-intercept is negative 2, 0. It's when our y is 0. And now that I have two coordinates here, I just simply need to draw my line and an arrow at each end. Do not forget your arrow. And that's it. That's how I graph in standard form for this equation. Here I have another example. 4x minus 3y is equal to 12. And same thing, if I want to find my y-intercept, I have to substitute x for 0. So 4 times 0 minus 3y is equal to 12. So 4 times 0 is just 0. And I have here negative 3y is equal to 12. If I want to get y by itself, I have to divide both sides by negative 3. And so that cancels out. Y is equal to negative 4. So our y-intercept is y is equal to negative 4 here. And that's 0, negative 4. Because when x is 0, y is negative 4. And then I have to do the same thing to get the x-intercept. So for my x-intercept, I have to substitute y for 0. So 4x minus 3 times 0 is equal to 12. That cancels out because it's 0. So I have 4x is equal to 12. So in order to get x by itself, I have to divide both sides by 4. And so x is equal to 3. So my x-intercept is 3, 0. And all I need to do is draw my line through that with arrows at each end, and I'm done. So lastly, I have 10x plus y is equal to 5. If I want my y-intercept, again, substitute x for 0. So 10 times 0 plus y is equal to 5. And now this cancels out. So now I just have y is equal to 5. And that's it. I don't have to divide by anything because I already know what y is. So that's my y-intercept at 0, 5. And now in order to get the x-intercept, I have to substitute y for 0. So 10x plus y, plus 0 is equal to 5. So this cancels out. I'm left with 10x is equal to 5. In order to get x by itself, I have to divide both sides by 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1. So x is equal to 5 over 10, which is actually half. So my x-intercept would be at the half mark, right here, in between the 0 and the 1. And all I would do is just draw my line through these coordinates. And that's it, I'm done. So this is my x-intercept is a half 0. And our x and our y-intercept, that's fine if it's a fraction or a decimal. And if you're having a hard time plotting it because it's a fraction or a decimal, just estimate. It's okay if it's vaguely where it's supposed to be. Just estimate. And that's it. That's how we graph in standard form.